public was aware of.
And yet, I wonder if you asked an average American on the street, could they name something that you revealed in that file? Could they think of something that they had learned before you leaked it? Do you think that they could, or what should come to mind that you revealed to the world that they didn't know before?
Yeah, I unfortunately, and portions of the book are redacted because the U.S. government won't allow me to disclose that information.
But the nature of what you're sort of talking about, it's been reported it included footage which showed US soldiers allegedly targeting civilians, and then what turned out, as it's been reported, to be a Reuters photographer, for instance. So that's what's...
well, allegedly, it has... That was found. I think that...
Yes, sorry, but my point is you're talking about redaction and what we're able to say and how things were reported as well at the time. But it's that sort of thing that you were trying to share with people, that essentially the military wasn't acting how people perhaps thought.
Well, I think it's actually more complicated than that. And even using that video as an example, it's less of a black and white and it's more of a gray. It's a grayscale video in that it shows the sort of complexities that are involved. It shows, not just an attack on a Reuters journalist, which is what, journalists seem to care about, but also on, a vehicle with, of unarmed civilians. And then the people on the ground, the soldiers on the ground who, when they uncover and reveal, and it's revealed to them like, oh, there are, injured children involved in this, then, you sort of see the best of, young U.S. soldiers, on the ground to try to, seek medical attention for kids. So I think that it's a much more complicated affair, and that's the whole reality of 21st century asymmetric warfare, in this time frame it is messy.
But essentially, you weren't just trying to show the good. You were trying to show the bad. You were trying to show what wasn't being reported in your view. And do you feel that a better grasp on the truth was held by the American public through your leaking?
I don't know. You'll have to ask them. I feel like that was the goal and the intention. But sure, the American public, has this information available to them now. But, also so does history. So do other, points in time ahead of us. So, it's...
But it wasn't yours to give. You were convicted of espionage. You were convicted of theft. And...
I was not... Look, I had a court-martial and there were charges of unauthorized disclosure, but, it doesn't belong, this kind of information, you can't hold on to this information. You're not going to be able to in the 21st century.
That's the point I'm making. As you say, you can ask the American public how they feel about that. And for some, you will be aware of this, view you as a traitor.
I don't encounter that on a daily basis. No, I don't.
No, but you will be aware. You will be aware that there is that view because of.
There's that view. There's that view, but it's usually among people who are, hardly relevant to the 21st century society. Most of the people that say these kinds of things are are usually people in powerful positions or are in who are older. So generational, I think there's a sort of generational difference between, sort of people who are aware of how widespread, having access to information is in this era of, we live in the era of radical transparency now. That's the sense that I get.
Let's say that there are those who agree with what you're what you're talking about, the themes and the principles, but they still feel uncomfortable about the way you released the information to WikiLeaks. What would you say to them that, did you do everything you could do to try and work within the systems that existed that were available to you within the army, within the military?
Those systems don't exist. Look, we can rehash this kind of history, and obviously I took responsibility for what happened. I made this decision. I did these things. And I went through a court-martial, and I went through this process. So we've gone through this.
Well, no, it's just you've written a book about it. So I think it raises the questions again. You say rehashing. I'm just trying to hear from you what you think has changed as a result of it, and how you engage with those who didn't feel comfortable.
Well, I think that now we live in a very different era. So I think in 2022, for instance, as a civilian, at my laptop computer in 2022, I look at, I can look at the Russian invasion of Ukraine, for instance, and I see that, now we're so awash in information that I feel like I have more access to information about an ongoing conflict in, say, March or April of 2022 than I did as an intelligence analyst in a classified environment in 2010.
So Fabien, talk to me a little bit about the ocean. It covers 70% of the planet. It gives us food, it gives us jobs, it gives us, of course, oxygen. We're taking too many fish out, we're polluting it, we're making it warmer, and only 3% of it is protected. What frustrates you the most about this?
The basic frustration is our ignorance about how integral ocean is to not only our well-being, but to our existence. And for far too long, we've been using the ocean as an endless resource in a garbage can. Imagine our planet is a three-dimensional system. The ocean represents 99% of our world's living space, about 3.4 billion cubic kilometers of volume, within which the vast majority of biodiversity lives and thrives. And that's what we're beholden to. That is what makes us possible as a species.
Bloomberg has enhanced search on the terminal to deliver what you need when you need it. Now, you can simply type phrases in everyday English in the command line. Compare financials. Find people. Analyze markets. You can enter phrases or ask questions. What do you want to know today? Ask a question or visit SearchGo to find answers now.
I think that it's hard to put your head around any narrative. Let's just be honest. We've had sort of a shift in, are we in some sort of stagflation fears moment? People were talking about that all day yesterday.
Do you feel that about the US military? Do you feel it's more open now, that you have more access to that sort of information?
I do think so. I think that there's been, the 2010s were a turbulent sort of era for large institutions that were encountering the widespread access of information for the first time. We saw this, obviously in 2010. We saw this in 2013 with the other set of leaks that happened in 2013. We see this with cell phone cameras, where and broadband internet access being more widespread and available, with cell phone camera footage of police brutality, causing controversies now. So I think that we do live in an era in which now there's, because of the amount of, in fact, there's too much information. We're now in an era where it's very hard to discern valuable information that is validated from disinformation and misinformation.
Yeah, of course. The verification of information is a major battle. You talk about what happens to you, and I want to go into that, which you talk about in the book as well. But just on that point of writing this and putting it in a book, who's this book for? Who are you hoping to tell your story to, or convince perhaps of why you did what you did, or what you were hoping to achieve?
So I view this book as a coming-of-age story for me, and I've aimed this book towards a younger version of myself, right? This is essentially a book that I wrote with myself at the age of 15 in mind, right? I dedicated this book to sort of young trans people as well, who are, and that's how I view this. This is I'm not much of a fan of the thriller novel, so I didn't want to tell that kind of story. I wanted to tell a coming-of-age story because it's not even really a memoir. This is about a time period in my life in which I am, very young, and I'm still kind of young.
Yeah,
so,
no, you are.
Yeah, I'm in my mid-30s, so I'm just starting to get my life together.
Well, and it's quite a coming-of-age story because of then, as you say, taking responsibility. What happens to you? You're transported to Kuwait and a metal bar cage for 49 days. is part of your experience. Well, you tell me, but I did want to ask, because you do then go on to do several spells of solitary confinement, but can you describe what that is like for us?
Sure. So solitary confinement is, it's kind of hard to describe, and it was actually really hard to write about because there's not a lot that's happening, right?
Yeah.
You know, it is there's a lot of sensory deprivation. There is a sort of focus on food, on sleep, on just trying to regulate your own body. And I remember in Kuwait in particular, it was actually very fuzzy and foggy because of how hot it was. It was, like in the high 30s to high, to mid 40s in temperature, in Kuwait, and I was, and it was, it was dark, and it's very hard to write about this time period, for a number of different reasons, because there's not a lot happening, and also there's just this hyper awareness that starts to develop on the sort of conditions around you, and this sense of self, and the sense of self-awareness about yourself. I mean, it almost feels like a more animalistic period, for me, where it's not like I'm not even thinking almost in words. I'm just thinking of just food and sleep and trying to get through the next period of time, and
survival.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I read, and you tell me again, that you didn't think you were actually going to go to prison. And then for doing what you did. So you go from that to this, which is such an extraordinary contrast, I imagine, as well.
Yeah, and it was very unexpected. This has never happened before. So
would you have still leaked, Chelsea, if you knew you were going to go to prison?
I'm not gonna speculate on what I would have done if I had known something different. But I look. I can't change what happened. Yeah. I can't do anything about, I would have been a different person if I had made any other decisions. It would have required me to sort of have a different background or for a different set of circumstances. But I think that even the potentiality of losing my career and the potentiality of being discharged and of losing my security clearance and essentially being cast aside and cast out of the military and essentially working back at Starbucks gave me pause. It was that was definitely enough to that was definitely enough to be, that was I viewed those, in terms of like having a career at this time. These were major consequences.
And then there were the consequences, which were much more major, as you say, and you get a sentence of 35 years, and going to America, then in jail. And I also understand you were in a position where you tried to take your own life on 2 occasions, which gives a sense to anyone who's just perhaps coming to your story about how difficult this was.
I have had quite a journey. Yeah. And obviously, there are time periods in which you lose hope and you give up. And, but you can also get past that. And I'm thankful that I'm here and that I have been able to grow and develop and meet people and have the friends and the support network and the wonderful people that I have in my life, and that I'm able to see my family again.
It doesn't end up being 35 years because Barack Obama commuted your sentence, President Barack Obama. One of his last acts as president. Why do you think he freed you? What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, he said the reason why, which is, Chelsea served a tough sentence, and it was disproportionate. So he's obviously weighed in here. It's not that he views it as that. I didn't do anything wrong at all, right? In his mind. So, but I took responsibility. I served a significant period of time in prison. So that was his rationale. That was the one he stated.
people may not realize you did go back to jail in 2019 to 2020. This is when you refused to testify before a grand jury investigating Julian Assange.
Well, I mean, I want to clarify that.
Please do.
Because the U.S. government never acknowledged that, and they actually denied that it was targeting a specific individual.
Okay.
So we don't know. I do know that I was asked specific questions regarding the 2010 disclosures. So my lawyers obviously speculated that it might be about a specific individual, but from our perspective, it could have been anybody. It was not limited to a specific individual.
And on that point, then, for what you do know and what we know, well, what we now know you don't know as well, why didn't you want to do that?
So the grand jury process is a very problematic one in the U.S. It's used almost exclusively against people in very high-profile and political cases. In various instances throughout history, this has been used to sort of go after people whenever they've, like double jeopardy is at play or immunity has already been conferred or something like that. And so I viewed this as sort of the U.S. government getting back at me for the commutation of in 2017
for what had happened then. Okay, so that's your reasoning, because some took that. I know that you're saying about the individual, but some people took that or may have taken that as your support for Julian Assange. Is that right?
I don't. I know that I know that there was an indictment that was unsealed during the process, and so the fact that an indictment was unsealed during that process and I was still incarcerated for something that had already been indicted leads me to believe that it wasn't for that. So obviously the investigation at that time was for something bigger.
But do you support Julian Assange?
I find it problematic that the U.S. government is going after the individuals involved in the events of 2010. Yes.
Okay. Are you in touch? Do you have a relationship? Because it was WikiLeaks to which you released these documents.
I don't know if I've ever had any direct contact.
Okay. It's just, we're speaking and it's a chance on the record to say what you want to say about that.
Well, I find it problematic. Obviously, them going after all of the people involved in the disclosures, I think in this manner and in this way is I think very problematic. And I think that as this unfolds and as it grows, and it goes and it gets I don't know how much I don't know who else is going to be brought into this. I don't know how much bigger it's going to get, but I'm alarmed at this case and at how the U.S. government is approaching this. That's all I can say.
Suppose somebody is watching and says, I want to be Ari Emanuel when I grow up. What should somebody do to get into the talent agency business or the business you're in?
Well, it's hopefully what I've taught my kids. You got to be intellectually curious. You got to be, you got to show up. And you know this like I know this. I got on a lot of planes. Even though that voice in your head is saying, oh God, I'm so tired, I don't want to do this. You got to show up. You got to be charmingly relentless. You have to build emotional endurance because there's no straight line to success. It's kind of all over the place, and you have to just be able to work through those things. And then I think one of the things that I do every week is I try to create serendipity.
Access the financial world on demand. Hear from leading economists, policymakers, and industry experts via live and on-demand webinars, only from Bloomberg. Start exploring to see what's moving the markets. Visit Bloomberg.com/webinars.
Do you feel it's over for you, or do you still worry about this? Is this something that keeps you up at night?
I think it's over for me. For me personally, I think that this is a chapter that is closed. I've said what I've said. I've gone on record. I've taken responsibility. I think that, and I'm eager to like get on with my life. I'm eager to, one of the reasons I wrote this book was to essentially, go on record and to build and to grow and to say, look, go to the book, here's my story for the stuff that happened 12 years ago that almost has no bearing on my daily life.
Yes, but going back to jail in 2019 to 2020 must have been extremely difficult, to say the least.
No.
I imagine. No, it wasn't a dark period to have to be back without your freedom.
No, I honestly, I'm so severely institutionalized that the idea of going back to jail is, honestly, jail is not a scary place to me. It is, there's a part, there's a kernel inside of me that sort of views, prison as being sort of like just like high school or just like.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. I think that
That's fascinating.
It's a place where I've spent a significant period of time, and I find it difficult. I honestly find it more difficult out here because I've spent so much time in prison that I kind of view the world through the lens of prison first, because like I understand sort of how prison and institutions work. I mean, obviously, school, military, prison, and out here is a bit messier, and I'm still trying to navigate things, and it's kind of tough.
Well, no, I just find that really fascinating because what you seem to be saying, but you tell me, is that being free can be harder and more frightening at times.
Especially if that's what you know, right?
Yeah.
Because what I know, there's a familiarity with being in an imprisoned environment, right? In a carceral environment. Like there's a familiarity with that. Like I know what tomorrow brings in that kind of environment. I know how I know sort of how the social dynamics work. I know, it's a very, it's a very structured kind of environment. And out here it's messier.
Do you miss prison in any way?
I think that I certainly think that, just like any other institution that somebody can stay at for a significant period of time, I think that there is a nostalgic feeling that comes with that. It doesn't necessarily mean that that I want that. Obviously, prison is not an ideal place to be in. But yeah, I think that there is I certainly have just like in combat and being in a war zone, like there are nostalgic feelings that come with those kinds of time frames. And the sense of support that I had from from either the other inmates that I had or from the friends that I built or the relationships that I built.
Well, no, I was also going to come on to we talked a bit about how some may feel not favorably towards what you did, but it's also been reported that you received 270,000 letters.
I did.
In prison. I don't know.
Yes.
I mean, that's extraordinary. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I received so many letters. I couldn't read them all. I do remember that the United States Disciplinary Barracks, the prison that we had, I think they had to hire additional staff in order to go through it all. Because they obviously couldn't hand stuff over to me. And I did keep some of the negative pieces. I think I got 11 pieces of negative mail the entire time.
Okay, so, you're someone who likes your statistics, and that's a pretty good ratio.
Yeah, well, I'm a data scientist.
Yes.
That's what I do.
And are you still a data scientist? Because I also read someone's described you recently as a socialite. I see you in Vogue posing, and also as a DJ. So you seem to have several roles at the moment.
Yeah, I'm doing all of the things that I missed and that I didn't get to do. Now that I've written the book, which took up quite a chunk of time, I'm able to sort of do these things. And obviously the pandemic sort of, it's been a messy few years. So I do a number of different things, but ultimately I would say that currently my job is essentially to be a security consultant. I work for a number of different clients, one of whom is a privacy-focused company that is working on a privacy-based project that actually is based on an idea that I proposed in 2016.
Okay, so that's kind of the day job, and by night, DJ, party attender, whatever's happening.
Yes, I have been known to be a party animal throughout my life.
Chelsea Manning, thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for being with us. Until we meet again, take care and goodbye.
At some point, you had to fight for the trademark, right, for the Red Sol.
Yeah.
Was that stressful?
Very stressful. Very stressful. Especially, you know, we are a small company in a way, and to have to fight people who have those huge companies who put you 27 lawyers on your back for something which is yours is very stressful. I mean, I wish I wish it didn't happen. Everything which happened to me is a lesson in a way, bad or good, and once it's done, and you're sort of happy. I'm happy about it. That thing I could have definitely avoided, but it's done.
Did you realize at the time when you started the company that you would become so successful and actually so big?
No. You know, when I started the company, I wanted to have a shop in Paris, which is my hometown, and I wanted to do pretty shoes for pretty girls. That was my goal.
And now you look back and you say, actually, I still make pretty shoes, but for many more women.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think you would have been so successful without the Red Sol?
I think the Red Sol definitely, of course, participates to my work, but also to the fame of my shoes because it's instantly recognizable. But then, you know, the design is very important. But definitely, when you have such a strong sign of recognition, it participates to, yeah.
Hi, I'm Francine Lacroix. Join me on Leaders with Lacroix as we explore what drives the most influential people on the planet, with guests like U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate Change, John Kerry.
Climate has no affiliation with any party or ideology. Listen to the scientists. This is not a matter of ideology. It's not a matter of politics. That's the challenge.
Leaders with Lacroix on Bloomberg Television, TV Go, and Bloomberg.com.
Markets countdown in Europe from the financial centers of the world. Bloomberg Markets European Close with Guy Johnson in London and Alex Steele in New York. Real-time numbers, real-time analysis. Weekdays. When U.S. jobs numbers are released, Bloomberg brings you crucial data at terminal speed and instant expert analysis. Nobody covers jobs day like Bloomberg.
Sports has always felt like the polar opposite of virtual reality. One is physical and tactile, the other is perceptual and intangible. One is mainstream, and the other is still pretty niche.
Big opening here.
But more and more, they're becoming intertwined.
I think it's time for my workout.
You seem like a natural.
Whoa, that's a little too realistic.
Athletes, fans, and people just trying to get in a good workout are discovering that the virtual world holds new possibilities. And companies like Meta, the corporation behind Facebook, are hoping they can draw new adopters by getting physical, virtually.
So we think, just generally speaking, there's a huge application for sports in the metaverse and in virtual reality.
I think it's truly going to enhance the way that fans, players, everyone just experiences sports going forward.
And for the world's most valuable leagues and teams, can these new digital ecosystems allow fans to not only consume, but participate in their favorite pastimes? Or will they not even make it out of the starting gate?
That virtual selfie we saw of Mark Zuckerberg, that's a $10 billion selfie. That's what $10 billion buys you. That's where the criticism's coming.
So if you wanted to think of what is the hardest thing we could possibly do in the metaverse, it's probably in the area of sports today.
Don't tell me I drowned the ball. I'm as bad in here as I am in real life.
This is Jason Rubin, or at least his avatar. He's the vice president of metaverse content at Meta, the company formerly known as Facebook. He has a long history in games, from creating Crash Bandicoot to forming the gaming studio Naughty Dog. However, However, that experience hasn't translated to virtual basketball.
Somebody in the background is coding furiously to make sure I don't miss at this point.
This basketball hoop is part of Meta's Horizon Worlds, a sort of digital meetup space where you can build your avatar and connect with others in virtual reality, doing everything from work meetings, concerts, or casual conversations near a digital beach.
Is this the metaverse? Are we in that right now? Or like, what would you say this is right now on the scale?
We are in the metaverse in the same way that if you're on a web page, you're in the internet, but you are not the internet, right? It's going to take a while for us to build a massive metaverse that feels like a metaverse should be, and you'll never see every corner of it. I mean, that's part of the fun of it.
Now, the metaverse is a buzzword we've heard a lot in the last year.
The metaverse, the next frontier of the internet.
Big tech, big brands, big ambitions. People and companies are pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into the vision of the metaverse.
That reportedly is a place where we can all go and hang out and do business and pretty much live our lives, or at least our avatars can live their lives.
If you go back to the 80s, there was a movie called Tron.
Who's that guy?
That's Tron. He fights for the user.
People started to imagine, what would it be like if I was inside of the arcade, or what if I was inside of the computer? Like, what would happen in that world? What kind of opportunities would get created?
This is Ben Grossman, the CEO of Magnopus, who worked in the VFX and film industry for years before starting to work on bridging the physical and digital worlds.
The internet right now is like a newspaper. It's words, it's pictures. You click on the words, it goes to other things. You click on the pictures, they move into videos. So the internet is connected pages. What we're moving towards now is more the way the world works, connected spaces. If each of those spaces can exist between the physical layer that we all live in and a completely virtual layer, consumers will be able to interact with content the way that they want to, in the context that they want to, and probably moving towards one universal device that helps them do it.
Building out this new form of navigating our digital and physical lives is something the largest tech companies in the world are dedicating vast amounts of resources towards.
Meta, Apple, Google, Microsoft continue to make long-term investments in hardware and software to bring consumers and companies into immersive 3D worlds.
I sound like a boomer even though I'm not, but I'm like, I'll just hang out in the real world for now.
Yeah, I am a boomer, and I'm going to say, I just want to hang out in the real world.
The term metaverse is pretty problematic because it originates in science fiction, and it's associated with a little bit of a dystopian vision that not everybody would think is, something we should all be aspiring towards building. Unfortunately, all the other terms that people have come up with haven't really taken traction. And then courtesy of Mark Zuckerberg's decision to change the name of Facebook to Meta, now we have Metaverse.
Starting today, our company is now Meta. Now we have a new North Star to help bring the metaverse to life.
Meta has invested billions into this space, including reporting a $10 billion loss last year on its virtual and augmented reality arm, Reality Labs. This move to the metaverse started back in 2014, with then Facebook's acquisition of VR headset maker Oculus for $2 billion.
So they were really kind of in a very vulnerable business position with Google and Apple effectively controlling their access to most of their customers. So Facebook needed to kind of say, well, I need something that's next that we can control in its entirety. They would argue that that's in order to drive a better experience or in order to create, something that you couldn't have done while working through the plumbing of the traditional internet. I think renaming themselves Meta is probably an indication that they are tripling down on this idea that the metaverse is the next big idea.
Companies like Google, Valve, Sony, and Microsoft have all introduced products to the VR and AR space. Even Apple is rumored to be developing its own device. Meta has been one of the more visible companies in the space, aiming to create products and content not just for gamers, but for everyone. However, early versions of what the metaverse inside those headsets look like have not always been met with excitement.
There are larger issues here outside of Mark Zuckerberg posting a really weird baby-like selfie from the metaverse and his time on the Rogan podcast. It really goes down to whether or not people can even figure out what they want a headset for.
If corporations want headsets to be the next smartphones, they're going to have to make virtual reality more accessible and fun. One way to do that? Sports. Even simple ones, like throwing a basketball in a hoop.
Next time I do an interview, rule number one, gotta learn how to do the basketball before you do the interview, right?
There it is.
Okay.
There it is.
Oh, there it is. There it is. All right, now I can go home and sleep.
Yeah.
But like that just gave us something to do that we're talking, right? Like this is what you would do with a friend doing something. It doesn't have to be basketball, it could be whatever. But this is very different than sitting on VC with your hands in your lap talking. Meta is really excited about sports and fitness inside VR, inside the metaverse, for a lot of reasons. But one of the main reasons is it tends to be a social activity. And VR and the metaverse are social activities. We're excited in a lot of aspects of sports. We're excited in people's ability to see professional sports that they might be stuck at home alone, to see it with other people. We're excited about people playing sports together, whether it's recreations of real-world sports in virtual reality, or it's new types of sports that only exist in virtuality, only exist in the metaverse. And there's also aspects like training that are starting to work now, where people are training to become baseball players inside virtual reality, inside the metaverse.
Bloomberg has enhanced search on the terminal to deliver what you need when you need it. Now, you can simply type phrases in everyday English in the command line. Compare financials. Find people. Analyze markets. You can enter phrases or ask questions. What do you want to know today? Ask a question or visit SearchGo to find answers now. Access the financial world on demand. Hear from leading economists, policymakers, and industry experts via live and on-demand webinars, only from Bloomberg. Start exploring to see what's moving the markets. Visit Bloomberg.com/webinars.
The top names in climate change are on Bloomberg.
I want everybody committed to the kind of action that we need. We have a global emergency now. We're still putting 162 million tons of man-made global warming pollution into the sky every day, using the sky as an open sewer. That's trapping as much extra heat as would be released by 600,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs exploding every day. That's what the scientists tell us, and the data shows it. That's crazy. That's why we have a third of Pakistan underwater. That's why we have the historic heat wave in China. Nothing comparable to that ever. That's why the heat records are broken every year. And we're seeing an increase in the flows of climate refugees crossing international borders that are due to vastly expand unless we take action to solve the climate crisis.
Nobody covers climate change like Bloomberg, your global business authority.
All right, we're ready? Okay, watch my bun there.
And then you're good right there. Drill the goals to score as many touchdowns as you can. Show me and hawk up, so I'm going to need you to show.
How many you got?
Yeah, I got the highest score.
Okay, all right.
You got your play call, tap the break button, boom. Now you got that, you're good, hit break. Okay, cool. Boom, and then you got to find your guy and throw.
This is NFL Pro Era, a newly released virtual reality game that puts you in the helmet of your favorite NFL quarterback. You can select your team, pick your favorite play, and then just like a QB, either hand the ball off to a running back, find an open receiver, or take off running, but with the joystick.
Oh, that's that. You gotta get that ball out. You gotta get the ball out.
The game's available on a couple headsets and made by developer Status Pro, founded by former NFL wide receiver Andrew Hawkins and former Division I quarterback Troy Jones. The pair started with developing training products for pro teams that used augmented reality so athletes could practice with both real and virtual teammates. Now they want to bring that experience to a wider audience.
Football such a unique game because it's something that you can enjoy and watch and spend time with your family doing. But to get on that field and see it from the player's perspective and actually play it, I do think you'll gain a deeper appreciation of what goes into what you see on TVs on Sundays. And that's something that obviously as two former players were passionate about.
We kind of had this vision of, man, this technology was going to be the future, right? And how do we find our space in that? We're both former athletes. So we have a specific way of looking at it. And we felt like there was a way for us to kind of create an experience that everybody could participate in, from athletes to coaches to front offices to fans.
And in my demo, the immersion factor was believable. It felt like I was actually taking a snap at Acrisure Stadium. The sounds of players running at me made me afraid to hold on to the ball for too long. It wasn't perfect, however. While fans of teams might recognize their offensive line by their numbers, their faces aren't as realistic. And occasionally, you'll see some players defy some laws of physics. But even when things went wrong, the game still felt fun.
You see the guy to the slot right here, number 3 again? He's gonna break inside in the middle. Let's try to hit him in the middle when he breaks.
Oh my God.
You got the wrong hand. With the left-handed touchdown?
NFL Pro Era is not the first American football simulator to be created in a VR headset. There have been arcade-like games like 2MD and MVP Football, as well as what is essentially immersive advertising from Gatorade that features Peyton Manning.
Before we get you back out there, we need to talk about hydration.
But importantly, it's the first to have the official license with the NFL. And it's the first NFL-branded video game of any kind outside of Madden to debut since 2004.
I think the NFL, you know, just to be clear, they're the most powerful sports league in the world. And I think for them, it's about making sure that they're going into any partnership with someone, it brings value to their fans and to the league. And when you sit, even people who work for the NFL on the 50-yard line of the Ravens Stadium or the Eagles Stadium or the Giants Stadium, they're like, wait, I even realized that I've never been in this position. And I think when that started to circulate around the league and they started to see how this could potentially change their fans' experience, they immediately saw the value.
Traditionally, fans of the NFL have been able to have this experience already through the Madden video game, a yearly release that sells millions of copies, despite lackluster reviews over the last 5 years. Madden, from publisher EA, has the advantage of launching on all the major gaming consoles, as well as for PC and mobile devices. Sales for Status Pro, however, will be limited to only owners of virtual reality headsets.
All right. Let's roll down.
This is 2, 3, 6, 9. Warm up. Take 1.
Mark.
Okay.
You are ready.
All right.
Outside of the draw of major sports leagues like the NFL, one area that is bringing a larger and more diverse group of users to VR has been fitness.
This is 2369000 Bagatelle, and your warm-up is in New Zealand.
What's up, athlete? I'm Coach Leanne. Welcome to Sweat Symphony. Shake everything out.
At first glance, this might sound like the start of any instructor-led workout.
Hands up.
But from inside a headset, it feels more like a mixture of a Peloton class and Guitar Hero.
Supernatural was essentially created by two people who hated working out and wanted to find a way to make working out something that was actually fun instead of dreadful.
This is Leanne Pedante. She's the head of fitness for Supernatural, a VR app that feels more like a fitness studio than a traditional game.
You put on this headset and you're transported to a beautiful immersive location like the Galapagos Island or the Great Wall of China, and you're smashing or boxing to targets that are flying at you to music that you know and love while being coached by a coach like me who is guiding you through the experience and reminding you what an amazing athlete that you are.
Nailing that backhand.
Supernatural's also structured more like a fitness studio. You buy a membership for around $20 a month, and you can choose from a list of workouts like boxing, flow, meditate, and stretch. And new workouts are added every day. Launching in the spring of 2020, the app gained popularity as many people were searching for ways to work out while under lockdown. And notably, people who didn't traditionally visit gyms.
Myself, I've been a Supernatural athlete for
just over a year now.
Fitness presents a lot of barriers for a lot of people. A lot of people feel left out of fitness or they feel unwelcome in gyms. And Supernatural has the most diverse community of users and members that I've ever seen in my career. We have members from their 20s to their 80s and 90s. We have members who are using this to train for ambitious sports, and we have members who have never worked out before in their life and are doing it for the very first time.
Everybody want to be a consultant, and what are all these consultants doing?
Well, David, I think that we actually defy the label consultant because sometimes consultant seems to imply that we only give advice. And when you look at what Accenture does, we're really different than the traditional version of a consultant. We're really about relevance and results, and that's what is driving our business.
What about a consulting project? In my example, I'm the CEO, I have a problem, I call you up, I say, solve my problem or give me a solution.
We don't operate as big companies permanently in crisis mode. And so when you think about like how long does it solve things, a lot of it starts with, you know, the company being willing to set aggressive goals. And so what we are trying to do now is work with our clients to work differently and to work faster.
Growing and expanding that user base, especially to an older and more gender diverse audience, is incredibly important to companies hoping to profit in the metaverse. On October 28, 2021, Facebook rebranded as Meta. The next day, it announced plans to buy Supernatural Studio Within for a reported $400 million. But in July of 2022, the FTC sued to block that purchase, saying Meta is trying to buy its way into a monopoly over virtual reality. In a statement, Meta claimed their purchase would only benefit the industry, saying attempting to bar Meta from making acquisitions at all benefits no one, especially if the goal is to encourage innovation and competition. While many studios are hard at work to find what could be the killer app when it comes to virtual reality, the other question that remains is if this new spatial internet does materialize, how will companies profit from it? And that leads to the bigger existential questions around the intimate, some say invasive, role big tech companies like Meta and products like Facebook play in our lives.
Right now, there are a lot of companies that work under a surveillance capitalism model. It's not the greatest word, but it kind of accurately describes the fact that the people who were once consumers are actually the product, and their data gets sold to businesses who then advertise products to them, and that's the economic engine.
This advertising business is massive. In 2021, Meta brought in $116 billion in revenue and $57 billion in profit from online ads. In the past, Facebook has drawn blistering criticism from across the private sector and government regulators about its collection and role in spreading disinformation and hate speech. And devices that would allow you to access digital worlds also have the ability to access more data about you, your location, your interests, and down the line, potentially even your emotions.
So a lot of concern has been put into, can we create a healthy economic model in a metaverse that isn't requiring advertising? And so the reality is, since the metaverse is really just a mirror of physical society by digital means and the spectrum in between, you can take any way that you can make money in the physical world and you can just do it digitally.
And some of the biggest sports leagues in the world are already testing this theory, starting with maybe the most obvious, selling tickets to virtual games.
Jaylen Brown took it in. That's a three from Al Horford.
The new era
era of technology with the metaverse, AR, VR is really just the latest chapter in an effort the NBA has been making for years, which is how to connect the game with fans and more fans than can fit in the arena.
This is Jen Chun, head of partnerships for the NBA, who have been an early adopter of VR technology. Back in 2015, the league was capturing a VR courtside experience at a time when 360 cameras were still held together with tape.
The actual capture technology of the cameras has improved, but I think also it's the experiences around where you find those games. So, for example, this last season, in addition to being able to go into Horizon Worlds to actually see a game in VR, you could experience that we built called NBA Lane, which celebrated our 75th anniversary. So instead of just being able to watch the game, you could go into this virtual amusement park and actually yourself participate in slam dunk competitions, firing t-shirt cannons, and walking around in VR with your friend or other NBA fans.
This last season, the Brooklyn Nets and the Yes Network released what they called the Netaverse, a glimpse at what is possible in the future of viewing sports. While far from perfect, you could view the game from any perspective on the court. And just like going to a game in real life, proponents of a digital economy believe you will be inclined to purchase merchandise, maybe a virtual hat or jersey for your favorite team that your digital avatar can wear. The NBA has also experimented in the NFT market with digital trading cards based on highlights.
But I think what it really comes down to is the emotional attachment that fans have to the games, to particular moments in the games. And so to give fans the opportunity to have a sense of ownership of certain moments in the games is an incredible connection directly to the fans.
Let's see what we got here.
Door number 2.
It's unclear whether this emotional connection to teams or players is enough to create real digital values in these spaces. While Top Shot cards gained popularity early, their sales have since declined drastically. But for the NBA, creating these digital experiences and merchandise are more testing grounds for how future consumers may behave.
Innovation has to have a lean forward, bold, testing, take that first step mentality to it. It's a build it, they will come kind of attitude, but I think it's most important for us to continue to make sure that fans can connect to the NBA.
After all, leagues like the NBA or NFL are slow to change, especially when it comes to how we watch. Sports command some of the largest media rights deals in the world, and changing them, even to popular streaming sites, has been a slow process. But for Meta, they have high ambitions for how future fans will engage with sports.
The ideal scenario for me is that sports gets to a point where, in order to truly experience the fandom of the league you're most passionate about or the team you're most passionate about, you have to do it under Quest. The history of new technology being rolled out certainly supports sports helping drive audiences. We saw it with Fox becoming a major network by going out and acquiring NFL rights. We saw DirecTV go after NFL rights as well in order to get audiences to pay for their products.
Football? Up to 13 NFL games every Sunday if you want them. I love you. I know, sir.
What we're excited to see with VR in the future is the ability for this to become a part of your common behavior, the best way that you could watch, express, and really engage around a live sports event.
But as Ben Grossman explains, having the metaverse, whether that's an AR or VR experience, be the primary way we consume sports from a technical perspective is still a long way off.
Sports is fundamentally one of the few things left in society that is very dependent on the power of live.
Iguodala gonna go in zone! How you like me now?
Latency, the time it takes between I did something and I received input in the metaverse is extremely critical and very difficult. In sports, it's the difference between win and loss. And in the metaverse, it's one of the hardest things to achieve.
We're going to take things up a level and talk about defense and footwork. Fists in front of your face.
The metaverse can feel fun at times, but also frustrating and empty. The idea of watching something inside of it with friends often still requires a lot of time and effort. and there's almost always some kind of bugs in the experience.
I think for people who are trying to tackle sports specifically in the metaverse, the rewards that are on the table are pretty significant. There's a lot of money in that area, and there's a lot of complexity, and the solutions to those problems are pretty ubiquitous. They apply to so many other things. If you can solve the problems in sports, well, then you can work backwards from that. You can do, movies and television type content. You could also get into education and a million other things. It is an argument to be made that you find those things that have the biggest economic opportunity, you work at solving those problems, and then you use those solutions to kind of go after the things that have less treasure at the end of that hunt, so to speak. And I think sports is one of those sectors.
Lots happening on Wall Street.
I'm quite encouraged. The center is holding.
Need to catch up?
This is Bloomberg Wall Street Week. I'm David Weston.
We've got the information and insights.
A lot of these areas still have very, very good valuations.
From businesses most influential and instrumental.
It's knocking it out of the ballpark.
Now's not a great time to be speculative. It's time for a pivot.
We're talking about a significant hit to our standard of living.
Bloomberg Wall Street Week, live tonight with replays all weekend on Bloomberg Television and Radio. News breaks. No one covers the world like Bloomberg.
In addition to him pleading not guilty, as we had expected, to 8 criminal counts here, there was a lot else that happened.
1 million people are getting infected every day, and that's going to rise to 3.7 million by January.
The UK is the only G7 economy that hasn't returned to its pre-pandemic level yet.
Bloomberg, your global business authority.
As governments, we have a responsibility to create the incentives and the space for you to flourish, a receptive environment for change, and the accountability that comes with guardianship. In many nations, the foundation for this approach has been laid for us long ago if we choose to listen. Where I come from, Aotearoa, New Zealand, a beautiful place you must visit, our Indigenous people hold a worldview that every single living and non-living thing is connected. Our people, our plants, our animals, descendants of Ranganui, the Sky Father, and Papatuanuku, the Earth Mother, and their children. And so it follows that people and nature are kin, are family. And we must care for one another in the spirit of kaitiakitanga, which translates into guardianship by the people of the land for the next generation.
In 1971, Wire and Plastic Products plc made shopping baskets. In 2022, WPP, as it's now known, is the biggest advertising firm on the planet. Sometime between then and now, specifically in 1989, Mark Reed walked through the doors and played a starring role in that transformation. In 2018, Reed became chief executive of a firm in crisis. The man who had made the giant, Martin Sorrell, had stepped down. Today we speak to Mark Reed about a new age of advertising and how to run a business fit for the 21st century. Mark, thank you so much for joining us on Leaders with Lacqua. What does it mean being an ads man, an ad leader in 2022?
Well, I mean, our industry is at such
interesting phase, isn't it? We've just been through the pandemic. We've come out, I think, in many ways, ever more relevant. But we face a whole period of continued innovation in our industry with new advertising formats, new digital companies being launched, e-commerce taking off. Our industry is changing. I mean, it changes all the time, but it's changing now, I think, more than ever.
But if you look at the pace of change over the last 10 years, I mean, it's been incredible.
Yeah.
Can you go through the same pace of change in the next 10 years?
I think so. I mean, look, we're a big company. We have 100,000 people around the world, but we try to also have the heart, if you like, of a small company, to be very responsive. We have people day to day working on individual clients, working on client briefs. So I think that it's that trick, isn't it? How we get the scale of a big company, but also how we operate quickly and nimbly.
Other rivals are very focused on spending in tech. What's the future for WPP?
Well, I think what makes WPP special is creativity. It's ideas. You know, without ideas, there's nothing on these tech platforms. What would there be on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube without, you know, creative work and creative ideas and all the things that creative people flourish? So I think that creativity is what makes WPP distinctive and kind of where we want to invest. Now, of course, with technology, how we bring those ideas to life, where they live, where they exist, that's changing very quickly. So it's really about sort of building up what you could call the traditional skills, if you like, of the past, but blending them with a real understanding of data and technology that you need in the future.
So your role is changing, I guess. Is it still just pure advertising, or is it more advising clients and kind of navigating these uncertain times?
WPP is much more of an advertising company today than we used to be. Now, clearly, advertising is important to what we do, and you started with, I think when I go to customs, the customer says, what do you do? I say, oh, I work in advertising. But actually, WPP is much, much more than an advertising company today. We're as likely to be asked by a client, you know, how do I succeed on Amazon, as we are, what do you think of this television ad? So we've had to learn a tremendous number of new skills over the last 10 years, as you say.
So what happens in the next 5 years? Again, is it going to be Amazon? Is it going to be Twitter? Is there something else that will be the hot new thing?
Well, there's one good thing about WPP. We don't need to make, in a way, we don't need to make those decisions because consumers will decide, and we need to be where consumers are. So it's our job, I think, to understand all of those platforms and help our clients understand what's most relevant, where can they reach their consumers most effectively, what's going to deliver the higher return on investment. You know, we're very data and technology and fact driven today. So it's both the creative idea, but also the financial returns are important.
How did you end up in advertising?
Well, I sort of by mistake, really. Like many
good
things,
mistake or a bad mistake?
Well, I left university. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I wrote to a few sort of business leaders and companies, and I ended up working at WPP in the very early days. And I think when I started, I never thought I'd end up sort of sitting in this seat, if you like, at all. No.
What do you like most about your job?
I think the people. I mean, ultimately, we're a people business. We have clients who are people, we have creatives who are people, we have technologists who are people, and a lot of what my job is as CEO of the company is to give those people sort of motivation, to tell them where we're going, to encourage them to come up and do their best work, to encourage them to collaborate. But ultimately, you know, the job is as much sort of, sometimes you sort of think you're almost a psychologist, you know, as you are a business leader, I think, sometimes.
And so what's your best piece of advice? I don't know if it's psychological terms, but if there's a deal that you need to get or an account that you need to get that you're worried will go to a rival, what's your pep talk like?
My pep talk, well, I love pitches. I love being sort of leading from the front, if you like, and spending times with teams. I love to see the work that we're doing. When we pitch for a piece of new business, often when we come together. So I guess I try and put myself in the seat of the client. And what's the client going to think when they see this work? Are they going to be excited? Is it going to turn their brand around? How's it going to resonate with their consumers? So as much as possible, I think probably I try and play that role.
So how have clients changed actually over the years that you've been in advertising? Do they ask for different services now because the challenges are so much bigger?
I think clients have a tough time, don't they? You know, we've never lived through a period of so many crises. They're trying to manage enormous budgets, vast global enterprises. So they need trusted advisors, and I think that's kind of, in a sense, what they're looking to WPP and to our agencies and to our people to bring. You know, a real sense of, if we do this, what will the impact be? You know, from packaging through to advertising, through to public relations, through to design, and then in many, many new skills. You know, the days of old, if you like, you know, a lot of this was a matter of judgment. Now we're much more data-driven than we used to be. We'll look at market research figures. We'll measure the return on investment. We'll use digital media, in that way as well. So they've become, I think, much more analytically driven than perhaps they used to be.
What's the biggest challenge going forward? Is it, if you look at some of the technology companies, Twitter, Facebook, is that still where the future lies?
Well, it's interesting, in the first 6 months of this year, if you look at WPP, we've actually grown more quickly than the average of the four sort of tech ad companies, Google, Meta, Snap, and Twitter. So in a funny way, the challenges they faced are somewhat different from the challenges that we've faced. We tend to have bigger, more global clients. We're not so reliant on venture capital funded startups. So I think we're coming into the future really in quite a good position, and actually there are going to be a lot of opportunities for us.
Who do you see as your biggest rival?
We compete with our traditional rivals. We compete with the consulting companies. We compete with some clients that try to do some of this work in-house. So, but the great thing about our industry is it's always been competitive. Two people in a garage can start up an agency. They have done over many years. But I think that for the major clients that we service today, we're in a really good position. We just came off the back about a year ago winning the global mandate for the Coca-Cola company, and they looked at and tested every element of what we do as a business, from can we develop great creative work in China or India or South Africa, to can we embrace the media revolution, to can we show them how to partner with Facebook and Google and how to embrace TikTok, and every part of our business, and selected us as their partner. I think that talks to the sort of power we have and the scale that we have.
Is it more difficult now because of the cost of living crisis, because of the economic downturn? Do you start feeling it already?
Look, I think, as I speak to you today, I think clients' spend is amazingly resilient, actually. And, we can look at next year and we can worry about next year. And it's easy. I sort of learned not to worry about things I can't control. I can't control the economic environment. All I can do is put WPP and our clients in the best position to navigate it. When I look at it like that, I think, well, actually, what we do is super relevant. Clients have got to demonstrate to consumers what they're doing. We're working with supermarkets to demonstrate how they can help customers save money. Clients have got to innovate. They've got to, in many cases, put price increases through. So I think the need for marketing isn't going to go away. There's no doubt the next 12 months will be challenging, but I think we'll come out of it, as we've done before, in a stronger position.
Up next, clients and consumer. The ad man must speak to both. With people asking ever more from brands, we look at the balance between profit and values.
We're investing in a lot of different capabilities and features that makes the in-store shopping experience that much easier, that much more compelling, whether it's price check, browsing inventory in this store, so that we can really make that experience as convenient and as simple as possible.
Convenient, simple, that's sort of what people have needed in the age of COVID. Is that here to stay, or do we go back when finally we all hope that the pandemic will be behind us in some way? Do our changing shopping habits go back again?
What's really interesting about retail in my 20-plus experience is that convenience never reverts itself. Now, the form of convenience has shifted, whereas, say, in 2000 to 2010, a lot of convenience was driven by more stores nearby. Now it's stores in addition to digital. There's nothing closer than the phone in your hand.
Good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Welcome to Bloomberg Markets, trying to open.
This is Bloomberg Technology.
To our television and radio audiences worldwide, welcome now to Balance of Power. This is Bloomberg.
This is a market that, over the past few weeks, has made it clear it wants to go higher. It got a little spooked by the idea that geopolitical tensions are rising.
leadership is key for any firm's success, particularly in a creative industry. With more than 100,000 employees globally, how do you run a small city as a coherent business? We continue the conversation with WPP Chief Executive Mark Reed.
So as we look forward to 2023, what do clients ask you the most?
You know, we talk to clients about how much we're going to spend next year, what's the economic outlook going to be? And I think that's really the period of great uncertainty. I think what we say to clients is, you know, those that have done well should continue to support their brands because that's ultimately what they need to do. And as we saw even during the pandemic, those companies that sort of cut their marketing quickly found it hard to reinstate. So I think we say to clients, you know, don't be fiscally irresponsible, if you like, but do continue to invest behind your business, invest behind your brands, and that's really what they're coming to us, ask us how to do that. But how to do that in 2023 means different things, right?
Yep.
What do I do on TikTok? How do I succeed on Amazon? How do I manage my reputation? You know, how important are these influencers that we're talking about? And they're very different questions from 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah. So let's say I had a 10 million budget,
yeah,
right? And I wanted to, you know, touch the U.S. consumer, not alienate China, and kind of keep my reputation intact. How do I deploy that money?
Well, I think you start. What products are you in, Francine? What's the product?
What should I be in? Let's say energy drink.
So look, we're working with a number of soft drinks companies. Look, I think you've got to have a great idea. So you've got to start with what does the product stand for, and what does it mean to consumers. I still think you've got to look across the media mix. I mean, it's interesting. People talk about the death of television, but in some ways, television's being reinvented, isn't it? You know, Netflix are taking TV ads, Disney Plus is going to accept advertising. So those channels, I think, remain super relevant. I think you've got to understand, you know, creativity today in a very different way before. You know, we're trying to embrace different creative disciplines, from partnering with people from Hollywood. We've just done a partnership between the Coca-Cola company and Marshmallow on a new drink, or understanding what's going on in the worlds of fashion or sport. Those are also very interesting to do. Then you've got to understand how you're going to reach the consumer. You're going to go through Walmart or you're going to go through Amazon, or you're going to build your own distribution channels. And I think these are all questions in a way that, you know, that WPP can help you answer.
Do I have to have a chief executive a political point of view? So do I need to, you know, do I have to call out things that are morally wrong in my eyes?
No, look, I don't think that brands necessarily have to have a political point of view, but I think brands have to understand what's going on in society, what consumers care about, and how what they do is relevant to them. And we did a study, Mindshare, our media agency did a study, and it said 82% of consumers care about how brands sort of treat people, treat social issues, take a position on those. So you have to think about, you know, energy consumption. What's your policy on sustainability? What's your packaging policy? How do you treat your people? Where are you going to sell your product and who you're going to sell it through? So I think that those issues are important. I rather think of them about purpose than about them being political, if you like.
But are those real changes?
Absolutely, they're real changes. I mean, if I look at our
CEOs
people,
mean it.
Well, I think CEOs do mean it. Certainly, you know, I mean it. When I think about WPP, we have 100,000 people. You know, so they're passionate about these topics. They want to know, where do we stand on many of these sort of social or political or societal issues. I think societal is probably a good definition of them rather than political.
How will the Qatar World Cup actually change advertisers and the relationship with some of the big sporting events?
Well, I think that, you know, our advice to clients is really to think about, you know, the World Cup as a football celebration, and to get behind football and get behind fans. Now, clearly the controversies around, you know, the host nation are problematic, but I think our advice would be, you know, really as far as they can, just to focus on the football and the support for the football. And it's difficult, I agree.
How do you navigate China?
You know, we have a big business in China. We also have a big business in Taiwan. Again, I was reassured by, you know, some of the moves in the Biden meeting recently with President Xi in Bali. I think that's positive, but it's difficult.
Mark, there's something that struck me that you said, which, you know, of course, you would advise clients not to spend less in advertising because it's then difficult to ramp it up. Are you talking, is it like slots? Like, you know, when you go to Heathrow, if you lose a slot, then you don't get it back? Or is it just, if you rein in too much, then it's difficult to get the eyeballs needed to sell more?
I don't think so. Look, there was that old adage, you know, I know half my advertising works, I don't know which half. I think increasingly we know much more about what works and what doesn't work for clients. And so I think, we can look at, certainly in much of digital media, what the impact is. Do clients buy things? Do consumers buy things, or do they not buy things? So I think that a lot of the sort of uncertainty in our industry has been taken away by the use of data to measure results.
And this is online.
Online, but also offline. I mean, offline media, we know we have many, many rules of thumb to understand how to use offline media.
I mean, I know I get pop-ups for stuff when I talk. I mean, is my phone spying on me, Mark? Because I talk about something and then I have an advertising. Is that the way that technology is going to go? Not necessarily the spying bit, but actually being able to tell me what I want to buy.
I think we've been very clear. I think that consumers expect a right to privacy, and I think that's sort of a non-negotiable, and I think certainly something that we, try to push through all our work and everything we do with clients. I think at the same time, advertising needs to be relevant, and if it's more relevant, it's more useful to you. And so we can use data in a way to make advertising more relevant, but we have to do it in a way that's transparent to consumers, that doesn't misuse their data. I think all of those things are possible in what we're doing, really.
So what's the model for the future? I know there's also, and we did a piece on this on Bloomberg, when you go into a shop, and I think that the mannequin is basically scanning your eyes. So if you're looking at the shoes for an extra 3 seconds, then that's what pops up in the iPad that you're going around with.
Well, I wouldn't advise anyone to do that. Look, I think that the cookie was invented for many reasons, but it became this kind of universal way of, in a way, as you say, tracking or spying on consumers. And I think that moving away from the cookie is a good thing in terms of online privacy. There's only so much targeting you can do. Most of the world buy products from the Coca-Cola company. There's only so much targeting they need to do to be effective. And so I think sort of ultra targeting that's become sort of spooky is not helpful, frankly. It's not helpful to our clients. We wouldn't advise them to do it.
But if it's Coca-Cola, everybody knows it. What about a smaller brand? My energy drink that I wanted to sell that no one knows about.
Well, there's many ways you can build a relationship with consumers. It has to be a value exchange, doesn't it? Do they follow you on Instagram? Do they follow you on Twitter? What's the value exchange? And I think if there's a value exchange, then consumers will give you and let you use their data.
Up next, with recession universally forecast, how does the ad industry weather the storm? Mark Reed on selling in the age of inflation.
As governments, we have a responsibility to create the incentives and the space for you to flourish, a receptive environment for change, and the accountability that comes with guardianship. In many nations, the foundation for this approach has been laid for us long ago if we choose to listen. Where I come from, Aotearoa, New Zealand, a beautiful place you must visit, our Indigenous people hold a worldview that every single living and non-living thing is connected. Our people, our plants, our animals, descendants of Ranganui, the Sky Father, and Papatuanuku, the Earth Mother, and their children. And so it follows that people and nature are kin, are family. And we must care for one another in the spirit of kaitiakitanga, which translates into guardianship by the people of the land for the next generation.
Power, policy, politics. From the White House to the Hill, Bloomberg covers the leaders in legislation.
That was really a tectonic shift for this White House.
The theory of this bill, as I understand it, is there'll be a multiplier effect.
How did Democrats mobilize specifically younger voters?
Bringing you the political news you need to know.
The president has made it very clear that this is a significant focus.
For the intersection of Wall Street and Washington, nobody covers politics like Bloomberg.
Of the black swan, a global pandemic, war in Europe, rampant inflation. How is the world's biggest ad firm positioning for a slowdown?
Is there I don't know whether there's an interesting client that you'd like to do more of, or even a client. Is there someone that you would love to have in the books that you don't have yet?
Oh, I'm sure there is. I mean, look, we do fantastic work. I mean, I love all of our clients equally.
Of course, like your children, but no favorite.
Look, I think, an interesting Tesla's an interesting company. So far, they haven't spent money on advertising. I'm sure one day they will. I mean, I think Jeff Bezos said back in 2009, advertising is what companies do when they have nothing to differentiate themselves. And Amazon today is one of the world's top 5 advertisers. So I think that, companies develop and they come to a point of view where they need to talk to consumers about what they do, why they're relevant, what they have to sell. I think all of those things make what we do valuable.
I mean, it's interesting, right? If you look at the life cycle of a business, and I guess the ability for that business to be disrupted, when's peak advertising moment? When's the right time to really go for it?
Well, just look at the technology companies, Google, Amazon, Apple are some of the world's biggest advertisers, and they certainly didn't start that way. So I think that, we've learned that in the modern world, differentiation's increasingly difficult. It's increasingly difficult to do just based on technology or product feature alone. But actually brands, what people think of a company, what they stand for, what they do, that really matters. And I think that's what we're trying to do through advertising.
What was the most difficult day in your job? Do you remember that day?
Probably the first day. I mean, nothing prepares you to be CEO of a public company. I'd worked for WPP for a long time. As I said, it wasn't a position I expected to come into. And, if we face it, the company had a few challenges when I started. We hadn't grown. Our debt was probably too high. We were quite complicated as an organization. And so if I look back now on that time, just over 4 years ago, I'm pretty proud of what we've all done, collectively as a team, and it really has been, a collective effort. It's quite an interesting thing, I think.
Yeah, and your predecessor was Sir Martin Sorrell, so that was also, I guess, a challenge.
Well, no, he'd been in the company a long time, but I think when you take on a role, you do it in a different way, don't you? You do it in a way that's right for you. And I looked at where we were, and I think that one of the challenges was, how do we integrate analog and digital, right? Because that's sort of something that would become quite complex. So we brought Wunderman and J. Walter Thompson together to create Wunderman Thompson. We brought VML and Y&R together to to create VML Y&R, 2 big integrated agencies that can help clients across the full range of marketing spectrum to integrate analog and digital. So I think that was the first thing that was important. And I think secondly, we really wanted to expand what we did beyond advertising. We realized if we just in the advertising box, we weren't going to grow. So we expanded our offer into e-commerce, into commerce, into building experiences for clients, and much more deeply into technology. And we've been on that journey really of sort of reinvention of our traditional businesses, but also expansion into new areas so the company can grow its top line.
I mean, is it better being bigger because you service your clients in more industries and you have more of that data, or does it not make that much of a difference?
Well, I think what's interesting is the definition of scale and the competitive advantage of scale has changed. It used to be sort of buying power, buying muscle. We buy $60 billion of media around the world. That would give us certain leverage with media owners we'd use on behalf of our clients to get better prices. Yeah. Today's scale comes from data and from technology, and leveraging that technology investment and that data and that insight over multiple clients. So I think the scale helps, but come back to the point I made earlier, we've also got to be nimble and smart and quick because our business is day-to-day interactions with individual clients. So that's the challenge, is how we sort of create that scale without becoming, a big, dare I say, bureaucratic organization, which is the last thing I want to run.
Mark, how does advertising spending look like next year? So in the U.S., and again, is there anything really to rival the U.S. in terms of consumer spending or advertising spending?
Well, the U.S. is the biggest market. Together, I think the U.S. and China are about 50+% of the global advertising market, heading in different directions. The US expected to be relatively resilient next year. China, we're not sure, maybe another tough year. Global ad spend this year will be up 6 or 7%. Expectations next year are up 5 to 6%, so slightly slower. But don't forget, inflation's now 6%. So, we're used to looking at things in nominal terms, but we forget to take off inflation, which sadly is a little bit higher than it used to be. So I think it's sort of a relatively challenging year next year. But I think that things have proven a lot more resilient than people expect. So we'll have to see, I think, is how the year unfolds.
Do you think 2023 is the hardest year, or 2024 could be even harder if there's a lag effect in some of these inflationary?
Look, I think 2020 was a pretty difficult year. So we go through difficult years. There's many reasons to be optimistic, I think, about the future of our industry. It comes back to the types of questions the clients are asking us. They're much more significant. They're much more important. You know, the secret of success of any company is to grow. And I think that we, WPP, and our industry more broadly, can be really at the heart of a client's growth. You know, how do they succeed with consumers? How do they reach them in new areas? How do they innovate? How do they create new brands? Those questions are going to be just as relevant next year. You know, this whole digital transformation is going to continue. So these things aren't going to go away.
So what's the secret sauce of being a great chief executive? Do you empower? Do you micromanage? Like, what are you like as a chief executive?
I like to empower. I mean, I can't do it all on my own. And as I say, you know, I need to get the best out of the people I work for. So I'd like to sort of, as I said, lead a little bit from the front, spending time with clients, spending time in pitches. You know, we are a competitive industry. We're in pitches day to day. We win or lose business. So I think that we have to do that. But I also have to create a company which is collaborative. I don't think there's a tension between people that want to win, people that want to collaborate, but that's what we're trying to do, you know, a desire to do great work, to really push the boundaries from clients, but also a desire to work together, because sometimes, you know, no one person has a monopoly of the ideas.
Where will you be in 5 years?
I think that in 5 years we'll look different and the same. You know, things will be the same. I think is our belief in creativity, you know, investments in data and technology, but we'll probably be a slightly bigger business. You know, today we're 11,000 people in India, 6,000 people in Brazil, 7,000 people in China. I think those numbers will increase. They'll probably increase faster than the number of people that we have here in the UK or in the US. I mean, we're a UK company in a sense, but we're really a global company that's headquartered in the UK. The UK today is only 12% of our business. No, I don't know that will be wildly different, but I think we'll be bigger in other parts of the world.
Mark, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Francine. Thank you.
We don't have enough women founders, CEOs who are getting funding. So basically less than 2% of VC funds go to women, less than 1% go to women of color. And so in this innovation space, I said to myself, what's the best way to use capital to move things for women? And that's when I started to say, okay, I actually need to move some money into the venture capital space, and I want to do it smartly. I mean, the first goal is to make money. I'm not putting my money out as a social impact. I'm putting it out to make money. But I wanted to go behind funds like Aspect Ventures, that's run by Teresa Gao and Jennifer Fonstadt, who are looking at these opportunities, and they have a thesis around, my gosh, there are so many opportunities there if we go towards funding some of these women businesses.
Some LPs have said to me, all we care about is returns. Some of the best investors may not be the best people, but they have the best returns. What do you have to say to those people?
I have to say you're investing in what you know. And so you need to look at what trends are coming in the nation and how you're going to address them. Women are 85% of consumer dollars spent. Women control 70% of financial decisions in the house. So if you're not investing in products that go towards females or a women-led company, you're missing an opportunity because you just don't see it.
Japan's critical role in the global economy is changing as the world recalibrates. After decades of stagnation, Japan's leaders are forging a more innovative and sustainable path forward to revitalize the nation. Corporate giants, policymakers, and pioneers tell us how they're doing just that. Every week on Japan Ahead, right here on Bloomberg Television.
Why do the biggest names in business choose Bloomberg?
That is a great question.
It's a great question.
Great question. Great question. That's a question I get all night.
Bloomberg, top experts, great questions.
This is my kitchen table and also my filing system. Over much of the past 3 decades, I've been an investor. The highest calling of mankind, I've often thought, was private equity. And then I started interviewing.
Well, I watch your interview because I know how to do some interviewing.
I've learned in doing my interviews how leaders make it to the top.
I asked him how much he wanted. He said $250. I said, fine. I didn't negotiate with him. I did no due diligence.
I have something I'd like to sell and how they stay there. You don't feel inadequate now because being only the second wealthiest man in the world, is that right? About 40 years ago, a young college graduate, Mike Wirth, joined Chevron, then and now one of the largest energy companies in the world. Today, Mike Wirth is the CEO of Chevron and dealing with the multiple issues that energy companies have to deal with today, including renewable energy. I sat down with Mike Wirth to talk about what it's like to run Chevron today in the current environment.
So tell me about the state of the oil world right now. It seems as if the large oil companies or carbon energy companies are doing quite well. They have record profits, record revenues. And as a result of that, some people in the White House and other places have suggested a windfall profits tax. So is the industry in such great shape that it can afford a windfall profits tax?
Well, it's a cyclical industry, David. We see prices go up, we see prices go down. A windfall profits tax is not going to encourage more supply. It's not likely to reduce prices. In fact, it could do quite the opposite. President Carter tried a windfall profits tax in 1980. It was rescinded several years later, had collected a lot less revenue than was expected, and didn't result in more investment. It resulted in less investment and less production. So normally, if you want less of something, you tend to put more taxes on it. You want less smoking, you tax cigarettes. If we want more energy production, we want more supply to bring prices down, putting taxes on energy production is probably not a good idea.
In your current job, do you have to go to Washington to talk to regulators and legislators, and do you find that an uplifting experience to do that?
I do have to go to Washington. Uplifting is probably not the first word that comes to mind. I mean, they're detailed discussions, and we need to help regulators understand the potential consequences of some of the things they consider.
So would you say that Washington, by and large, doesn't really understand the economics of the energy industry, or they could learn a little bit more than they know now?
Well, I have empathy for people that sit in these roles. They have often broad responsibilities, and they may not have personal expertise and depth in some of the areas they're responsible for. So I view my job as to come in and try to provide objective input and help them understand the consequences of things they're considering to avoid unintended consequences and help achieve the goals that they're looking to achieve.
So when the President of the United States says energy companies are gouging American people, you get to be used to this when you're an energy executive, more or less, I assume. You don't like it, but you probably are accepting of it by now.
I disagree with that characterization. I don't think it's accurate. This is we're an industry of price takers, not price makers. These are global commodity markets, and prices go up, prices come down. We allocate billions of dollars of capital, our company does, every year. Just 2 years ago, we were losing billions of dollars as prices plummeted. And so through the cycle, it's an industry that generates kind of 10%-ish returns on capital employed, which is, I think, by the standards of many other industries, a pretty modest return.
So the war in Ukraine has driven oil prices up, I think it's fair to say. Do you think that that is a principal reason why the major energy companies are doing quite well, because the supply has been reduced because of the war in Ukraine? And do you think that when that war does end, eventually it will, I assume, it'll have an impact on reducing energy prices in carbon areas?
Well, the war and the associated actions have definitely had an impact on energy markets. But if you step back and look at the broader context, in 2020, we saw demand collapse with the pandemic when the world really locked down. In fact, companies in our industry had to shut in wells and stop producing because there was no place to store the oil that wasn't needed by the market. So investment levels came down, and then and nobody knew how long this would last. As the economy recovered post the pandemic, we got vaccines, demand returned. the industry's been struggling to keep up with the rate of growth once again. And so the market was already in a pretty tight situation before this war began. I do think when eventually it's resolved, and all conflicts eventually are resolved, I think that uncertainty and the risk to supply from one of the world's largest suppliers will be reduced, and I think we'll see markets reflect that.
A number of years ago, oil prices went as low as, I think, $20 a barrel. And when it was that low, major oil companies, like I think Chevron and others, said we can't afford to drill anymore in either, let's say, Alaska, the North Sea, other places, because we need to have oil at $70 a barrel to make drilling affordable and profitable. Has that come back now that oil prices are up? Are people now drilling in major projects around the world to kind of get oil that's going to take 4 or 5 or 10 years to build and drill, or is that not happening again?
We're seeing some of that happen again, certainly. What has really changed in the last decade, David, is what we see in the U.S. in the Permian Basin, but also in some other parts of this country and in other countries now, is the ability to produce oil and gas from rock that is very, very dense, very hard, and historically has not been very productive. But with directional drilling and the ability to fracture these formations now, we're seeing the ability to produce from areas that we couldn't before, and at prices that are lower than some of these very complex, difficult projects. And so the need for the ultra deep water, the Arctic, has been reduced as we see these other resources come in at a lower cost.
So how many employees does Chevron have?
About 36,000 in about 100 different countries.
And how much oil do you produce a day?
A little bit over 3 million barrels of oil equivalent per day. So mostly oil, some gas, and we convert the units on the gas to give you the energy equivalent. So about 3 million barrels a day.
So the United States produces 10 million barrels a day or something like that?
Closer to 12.
12, okay. So you're producing about 25% of the oil produced in the United States, more or less?
As a company, you could say that our U.S. production is about 1.2 million barrels a day. So we're less than 10% of U.S. production.
So right now, the United States is more or less energy sufficient compared to, let's say, the 1960s or 70s when we imported a lot of oil. I think we probably consume 10 to 12 million barrels a day.
Closer to 20.
We consume 20 million barrels a day, and we produce roughly, you're saying 12? So we're importing the equivalent of about 8 million barrels a day, which is better than it used to be. Where are we mostly importing that from? Is it from OPEC countries?
Canada. Our neighbors are the largest suppliers of oil. I mean, you remember all the controversy around the Keystone Pipeline. We're a big customer of Canada, who's a large resource country right next door.
How do you get that oil down here?
There are other pipelines that have been built in years gone by. Sometimes it flows by rail, and some of it comes by ship. You can bring it down through pipelines into ports along the West Coast, for instance, or into the Atlantic Basin and bring it by ship. So Canada's the largest supplier, and then other people in the region, and we still bring some oil to this country from the Middle East, but much less than we did back
now,
in the 70s.
Do you think there's much oil to be found in the lower 48 at this point, or even in, let's say, Alaska as well? Or mostly we know where all the oil is, and there's no more big Permian Basin kind of deposits anywhere?
People have said that over time, and then we've always been surprised. And so the U.S. has been explored more than any other place in the world. I think the industry has a good idea, but technology allows you sometimes to recover things that you haven't been able to before. That's the story of shale. The other one that continues to be a positive story is deepwater Gulf of Mexico, where we'll go out and drill in a mile or more of water depth and then go down several more miles, 6, 7, 8 miles into the earth and find large fields. And the Gulf of Mexico is still relatively underexplored compared to the onshore. So I think there's still room for more discoveries.
So when you're starting there 40 years ago, did you say, I might be the CEO someday, or did you not think that was realistic?
No, I just hoped I would last to the next 2 weeks to get my next paycheck. That was never the game plan.
Welcome into the world of decentralized finance.
I'm going to take a look right here at regulation.
We are seeing digital currencies under some pressure.
Bloomberg's covering all things crypto. The people.
I want to have some of my money outside of the sovereign.
The transactions.
This is a simple case of where did the money go?
And the technology.
If people wish to invest in it, they must be prepared to lose their money.
I am still very positive on real utility into this space.
Bloomberg Crypto.
Let's talk about Chevron itself. What is the roots of Chevron? When was Chevron created? When did it start?
Founded in 1879 in Southern California. Began as a company called Pacific Coast Oil Company. Made the first commercial discovery in California in Pico Canyon in Southern California. Became part of the Rockefeller Standard Oil Trust in the latter part of the 1800s, and then became Standard Oil of California when the Standard Oil Trust was broken up. Our headquarters and home has always been in California. We've been around for 143 years and really a part of the world's history. We made the first discovery in the Middle East, first discovery of oil in Saudi Arabia, among other milestones, and a long history of the world really reflected in our company.
So if I go to a gasoline station and want to get gasoline for my car, is there really a difference between the oil that Chevron might be produced that makes in the gasoline and one of your competitors? That gasoline is pretty much all the same?
There are specifications, minimum standards that have to be met for the products. And then what you find is that different companies either exceed those by more or less than others. And also, we have special additives. So we have a wholly owned additive company that manufactures an additive called Techron that has a very special chemistry to keep engine parts clean. And as engines get more sophisticated, as the tolerances get thinner, you can have carbon deposits that can affect performance in your cylinders, your injectors. Techron cleans that up better than others.
So if you're driving along and you need gas, will you stop at an Exxon station, or you got to keep going till you can see a Chevron station?
Keep going till I see a Chevron station.
Hey, let's talk about your own background. So how does one become the CEO of Chevron? Tell us, where were you born?
I was born in Los Alamos, New Mexico. My dad worked at the National Lab, and I grew up in Colorado, Golden, Colorado.
And you went to college where?
University of Colorado in Boulder, studied chemical engineering.
And you said, I want to work in the energy world?
At the time, chemical engineers could work in a number of different industries. I had a summer internship where I worked in a refinery in the Denver area. Found the work interesting. I found the people interesting, and had an offer to come to the West Coast and work for Standard of California. And it looked like a fun place to live and a place where I could do interesting work.
So basically, this is your only employer since you graduated from college, more or less?
For 40 years, the only employer.
So when you're starting there 40 years ago, did you say, I might be the CEO someday, or did you not think that was realistic?
No, I just hoped I would last to the next 2 weeks to get my next paycheck. That was never the game plan.
So what did you do? Did you move around the world over the course of your 40 years at Chevron? What did you do to kind of rise up? Were you an operations person or an exploration person, an administrative person?
Started out as a design engineer and worked on big projects. So an oil shale project, not the type that we develop today, but the other kind of oil shale you used to hear about. Built a plant that you can't find any trace of today. Worked on a facility in California to help bring in oil from offshore. Sold for pennies on the dollar eventually. A project in Africa that never happened because of a civil war. So I began by specializing in spectacularly unsuccessful projects. And at some point I said, this doesn't look like a great career path. And so I moved into our marketing business where I built gas stations and replaced underground tanks that were made of steel with ones that were made of fiberglass so they wouldn't leak. And you and I remember the old clickety-clackety wheels that would spin around on a gasoline pump. I used to put in the first electronic pumps back in the day. So these were smaller projects, but I could see the beginning, the end. I started to understand the commerce and how the business worked. And from there, a variety of roles, primarily operating roles across different businesses and around the world.
When did you become the CEO?
5 years ago, in 2018.
Now, some people might say that God looks favorably upon the CEOs of energy companies because he lets them live a long time, and a number of your predecessors have lived quite a while, and some of them you live in your same area that you live in now. Do they call you with advice all the time?
Actually, I'm really fortunate, David. The three people who have done my job immediately preceding me, each for roughly a decade, the 1990s, the 2000s, and the 20-teens, live within a few miles of where I live. I see them regularly. We have lunch together, and
that's a plus. In other words, don't they tell you you're doing this wrong or doing that wrong? That doesn't come up.
Well, I get a lot of good advice, and you asked earlier about advice. These are people who have actually done my job, so I'm interested in their advice. They've lived through wars, the fall of the Soviet Union, terrorist attacks, financial crises. They've seen oil markets go through gyrations. They've dealt with geopolitical surprises, and so their advice is really valuable. During COVID, the first thing I did was call each one of them and say, what lessons did you learn during the crises you faced? How do you think I should handle things as we have this pandemic unfolding? So we have a great relationship, and I see them regularly.
So you're still, by my standards, very young, and you've been the CEO for 5 years, so you could do it for quite a while and still be young, but do you have any ambition to go into the federal government as a cabinet officer or anything like that?
No.
And to do anything other than the energy industry, would you have any other career ambitions, or this is what you want to do?
You know, I love what I do. I love the company I work for and the people that I work with, and I don't have any ambition to do anything other than a good job.
So what do you do for relaxation?
Generally, anything that involves family. So I have 4 children. They're very active in outdoor activities. My wife is a good golfer, a good skier. So you'll find me on a golf course, skiing, scuba diving, fly fishing with family when I'm not at work.
And any of your children in the energy world?
No, not even close.
Okay, so are you a good golfer? There's a view that if you have a low handicap, that's not good for being a CEO because it means you're spending too much time on the golf course, but I don't know whether that's fair or not. But are you a scratch handicap golfer?
Far from it. My wife is almost a scratch handicap golfer. I caddy for her in big tournaments. I actually sometimes will take a couple of vacation days and carry her golf bag. So that tells you who the better golfer is in my house.
What do you like most about your job?
I think the people. I mean, ultimately, we're a people business. A lot of what my job is as CEO of the company is to give those people sort of motivation, to tell them where we're going, to encourage them to come up and do their best work, to encourage them to collaborate. Sometimes you sort of think you're almost a psychologist, as you are a business leader, I think, sometimes.
And so what's your best piece of advice?
I love pitches. I love being sort of leading from the front, if you like, and spending times with teams. I love to see the work that we're doing. When we pitch for a piece of new business, often when we come together. So I guess I try and put myself in the seat of the client. What's the client going to think when they see this work? Are they going to be excited? Is it going to turn their brand around? How's it going to resonate with their consumers? So as much as possible, I think probably I try and play that role.
On the David Rubenstein Show, Peer-to-Peer Conversations, I uncover the untold stories of the world's most successful leaders. Watch Wednesdays on Bloomberg Television.
large carbon energy companies seem to me have a difficulty. Are they producing large amounts of carbon energy, which people like to consume, or are they supposed to transition to being renewable energy companies? And what are you doing, for example, to transition yourself a bit to be a renewable company?
Well, we're focused on leveraging our strengths to deliver lower carbon energy to a growing world. And what that means is in the near term, we can find ways, and we are finding ways, to reduce the greenhouse gas impact of the energy the world uses today. So we're reducing the emissions associated with oil and gas that the world needs today, needs very, very desperately. And at the same time, we're building new inherently lower carbon energy businesses for tomorrow. So things like renewable fuels, hydrogen, carbon capture and storage, geothermal are all technologies we're investing in, businesses we're growing that will play a bigger role tomorrow. And we're going to need many solutions. There is no one solution for this.
So in 2022, you bought a renewable energy company for roughly, I think, $3 billion. What was that about? Why did you want to do that?
Well, we had a renewable fuels business ourselves. This company, Renewable Energy Group, was one of the leading producers of biodiesel and soon-to-be renewable diesel in the United States. And they have great capabilities in the feedstock sourcing area. And so in any fuels business, raw materials are a very important part of the overall value chain. Traditional petroleum products, we have deep expertise in the raw materials sourcing for that. In these products, you're talking about raw materials that are like used cooking oil, something called distillers corn oil, various bean oils from soybean and other agricultural products. These are markets that we don't have a lot of experience in. The quality, logistics, commercial dimensions of those markets are things that Renewable Energy Group is very good at. They have manufacturing facilities and some marketing. We have big market positions and brand positions, particularly in states like California, that encourage this. So the combination of the two makes a more powerful renewable energy business.
And today, in renewable area, which is obviously a growth area, do you think that if you were going to make more acquisitions without giving away inside information, you're likely to do more in the renewable area or in the carbon area?
You know, it's an active field of opportunity in both. For us, it's really driven by strategy, asset quality, value. I mean, the typical things you would look at when you do a deal. But as I said, over the last 2 years, we've done a big traditional energy deal. We've done a big renewable acquisition. I think in the years ahead, we'll probably do acquisitions in both of those spaces.
When President Nixon took office, shortly thereafter, there was an oil spill in Santa Barbara. And then under President Obama, there was an oil spill in the Gulf horizon. It was, I think, a British Petroleum. Right now, when you're drilling offshore, how safe is it to be able to avoid those kind of environmental damage? Is it much better than it used to be, or greater precautions than there used to be?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, the industry has continually improved operating practices, equipment. Certainly the regulators in the U.S. have very high standards. We work very closely with the regulators on that. And the advent of newer technologies have continually made this safer. And so these are challenging, difficult operations in those kinds of pressures, water depths, and environments. But the industry has a strong track record today. And, you know, there have been some notable incidents over time, but every company in this industry works really hard to prevent those.
So today, do you not worry about that kind of offshore drilling problems anymore because the safety is pretty good compared to what it used to be?
You know, every day I get up and I worry about safety and protecting the environment. Our people work in a demanding business, and it's a highly technical activity. We have very talented people. We've got very strict protocols and standards to keep people safe and keep the environment safe, but you can never take it for granted.
Why do you think it is that people love energy, but they don't love energy companies? In other words, people in the United States and around the world consume enormous amounts of oil and gas, and the people that provide it, like Chevron, don't seem to be so popular. Why is that?
You know, I don't know exactly why it is. You know, we're a big company. The numbers are big. Sometimes big isn't popular. Big energy, big government, big tech, maybe big private equities, an exception to that. But although we're a big company, we represent less than 2% of global oil production. And so in the scheme of things, it's a very competitive market, and we're a relatively small player. And I think, what's important to remember is we need to have a balanced approach to energy. And that means we have to focus on affordability, because affordable energy is really essential for economic prosperity, reliable supply for national security, because energy security and national security are linked, and then protecting the environment. And I think as prices get high and it gets less affordable, you find people that are upset. And part of that is because we really haven't necessarily been able to find the right balance among those three.
And to improve the overall image of the energy industry, is there something you think that the CEOs or the companies can do to improve the image so that people, when they walk down the street, say, wow, Chevron has done a great job for America today? How is that possible, or just energy companies just don't have that kind of likely public image that's going to be so good?
Well, I think what would help, David, is to engage in this more balanced conversation about the benefits of energy. We hear a lot of people that have, views on what some of the consequences are of the use of energy. But as you say, they've made advancements in the quality of life, possible that we wouldn't have imagined, 2 centuries ago. And I think as we go forward, it's absolutely likely that we find ways to meet the needs of a growing world and reduce the carbon impact.
Let's suppose tomorrow you decided to retire, become a cabinet officer or something, or do something else. What would you say you have achieved as the CEO of Chevron that you're most proud of?
Well, I would hope that people would say he thought of others first. He strengthened the culture of our company. He kept people safe and made the company a better company when he left than it was when he founded it.
When the price of anything goes up, the consequences reach far beyond what you'd expect. But perhaps most of all, when it comes